Brianna Stewart just admitted on camera that the New York Liberty are broken, and if you watch this press conference closely, you'll see the exact moment their championship dream died. Welcome back to WNBA Analysis, the channel that doesn't sugarcoat what's happening in this league. Look at Brianna Stewart's face in that press conference. That is not just frustration from one bad loss. That is the look of someone watching a championship window slam shut in real time, live, on camera, in front of everyone. The New York Liberty, the team everyone picked as title favorites back in the spring, just dropped their fourth straight loss. And it wasn't to a contender. It was to a scrappy Indiana Fever squad that, on paper, had no business winning this game. Watch the body language in this presser. Stewart can barely make eye contact with the cameras. The coach is fumbling for answers he clearly doesn't have. And by the end of this video you're going to understand exactly why this franchise is in complete freefall, at the single worst possible moment of their season. If you're a Liberty fan, buckle up. This one is going to hurt. But it needs to be said. Let's start with what actually happened on the court, because the stat line here is genuinely damning. The Liberty surrendered 30 points in the third quarter and another 33 in the fourth. That's 63 second-half points given up to a team they were supposed to dominate from tip to buzzer. But it gets worse. This team committed 17 turnovers, missed 10 free throws, and completely lost their defensive identity the moment the game got tight. These aren't just off-night numbers. These are the numbers of a team that has mentally checked out of its own season. And remember, this collapse didn't happen against a powerhouse. This happened against a team the Liberty should be beating 9 times out of 10. When you line up how this game actually unfolded, you start to see a pattern that goes far deeper than one rough shooting night. In the locker room afterward, Stewart was asked directly how it feels to drop a fourth game in a row. Her answer, paraphrased, basically boiled down to one thing. The losses have to stop piling up, and she personally has to look in the mirror at her own turnovers and missed reads before pointing fingers anywhere else. Now listen to what that actually means. She is essentially admitting in her own way that this team cannot handle adversity. When things get heavy, they don't have an answer. That is not the language of a confident championship contender. That is the language of someone drowning and quietly asking for a life raft. Here's what Stewart is not saying in that press conference, and it's the biggest story in this entire situation. This front office fired Walt Hopkins after a genuinely successful season and brought in Sandy Brondello. And ever since that swap, the chemistry on this roster has looked completely off. You can have all the individual talent in the world. But if the locker room isn't right, if the new coaching philosophy doesn't actually match the personnel you've built, you get exactly what we're watching right now. A stacked roster that looks completely lost during the most critical stretch of the season. Sit with this for a second. The Liberty are sitting at 13-12. Let that number actually sink in. This is a roster with Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu and Jonquel Jones on it. On paper, this team should be running away with the entire Eastern Conference. Instead, they're barely clinging to a playoff spot, nervously looking over their shoulder at teams that are supposed to be rebuilding from scratch. When reporters pushed the coaching staff on why star players like Betnijah Laney Hamilton were held out of the rotation that night, the answers were vague at best. Something about wanting to see what other pieces could give them, about trying to find combinations that work. That's not a rotation with a plan. That's a coaching staff throwing things at the wall in late July and hoping something sticks. This is the moment of the entire press conference that tells you everything. A reporter asks point blank, "At what point do you start to consider that this losing stretch is simply who this team is?" Watch how fast everyone in that room scrambles to reject the premise. The coach insists they've proven they're better than this, that they've had real high points during the season. But have they really? Because when you actually rewind the tape on this Liberty season, the pattern has been there from day one. They feast on bad teams early in games and look every bit like title favorites doing it. But the second real adversity shows up, the second they're facing a team that's actually competing, they crumble. That's not a slump. A slump is temporary and explainable. What we're watching is a full identity crisis playing out on national television. Stewart talks about needing to be more critical of herself, about leadership in the locker room, about finding a way. But let's be honest about what those phrases actually are. They're sports cliché bingo. We have heard struggling teams say, "We need to look in the mirror," for literally decades. Words like that mean absolutely nothing without action to back them up, and right now there is no action behind them. Now we get to the real core of this disaster, the defense. Stewart openly acknowledged giving up 63 points in that second half, specifically pointing to the team's inability to stop live ball turnovers from turning into easy transition baskets on the other end. But here's the deeper issue underneath all of it. the Liberty's defensive identity has completely evaporated. Earlier in the season, this was a tough, physical team that made every single opponent work for every single basket. Now they're getting run off their own home floor by a team that struggles offensively on most nights. The Indiana Fever dropped 63 second-half points on a team that's supposed to be an elite defensive unit. That is not a personnel problem. That is an effort problem, and effort problems in professional sports always trace back to one of two things: coaching or culture. Now think about what that means heading into the postseason. Even if the Liberty scrape their way into the playoffs, even if they somehow right the ship enough to lock in a respectable seed, do you actually trust this version of the team in a best-of-5 or a best-of-7 series? Do you trust them to execute in the fourth quarter of an elimination game when they can't even execute in a regular season game in July? I don't. And based on everything we just watched in that press conference, I don't think they trust themselves either. The single most brutal exchange of the entire presser comes when a reporter asks Jonquel Jones why it was so difficult to bring energy after several days off. Jones freezes. She stammers. She essentially admits that yes, effort was a real problem, but she genuinely cannot explain why. And at this level, that is unacceptable. These are professional athletes getting paid to compete at basketball's highest level. The question, why was it hard to play hard, should never, ever be a difficult one to answer, because the honest answer should always simply be, it wasn't, we played as hard as we possibly could. The fact that she couldn't even form a real response tells you everything you need to know about where this team's collective head is right now. And notice Stewart stepping in to shield her teammate in that moment. That's veteran leadership trying to protect someone under pressure, and on a human level, it's admirable. But it doesn't change the underlying problem one bit. This team is not competing at the level required to win a championship, and the longer everyone pretends this is just a temporary rough patch that fixes itself, the deeper this hole gets. Let's zoom all the way out, because this Liberty situation is far more complicated than a simple 4-game skid. This is a franchise that made a genuinely controversial coaching change, installed a brand new system, and is now discovering in real time that talent alone does not win championships. Chemistry matters. Coaching fit matters. Mental toughness matters. And right now, the Liberty are failing on all three fronts simultaneously. Start with the coaching decision itself. Walt Hopkins had this roster in the playoffs, developed young talent, and built a genuinely competitive culture from the ground up. The front office decided that wasn't enough. They wanted a proven championship-level coach, so they brought in Sandy Brondello, a coach with a title on her resume from Phoenix. On paper, that move made total sense. But coaching is never just about drawing up the right play. It's about connecting with your players, understanding what makes each one tick, and putting them in positions where they can actually thrive. Based on everything we're watching unfold, that connection simply isn't there yet. Go back and watch how Stewart carries herself in that press conference. She's taking the blame almost entirely onto her own shoulders. Her turnovers, her missed free throws, her defensive lapses. That's a superstar who doesn't feel like her coach has her back. That's a franchise cornerstone who feels like she personally has to carry the entire weight of this team because the system underneath her isn't holding up its end. And when your best player feels like that, when the face of your franchise is silently shouldering all of the responsibility, that is, at its core, a coaching problem. Now let's talk about how this roster was actually built, because that's another layer to this entire disaster. The Liberty went all in on star power. They built a genuine big three around Stewart, Ionescu, and Jones, sacrificing bench depth to pay 3 max-level contracts. The bet was simple: 3 elite players can carry you through the regular season and then completely take over in the playoffs. But that only works if all 3 players actually fit together seamlessly, if they complement each other's games, if they genuinely make one another better on the floor. Right now, none of that is happening. Stewart is trying to do far too much because she doesn't fully trust the pieces around her to execute. Ionescu is forcing shots because the offense isn't consistently generating clean looks. Jones is disappearing for long stretches at a time because she isn't getting touches within the flow of the game. 3 genuinely incredible individual talents are somehow making each other worse, and that is a systemic failure. That's a coaching staff not putting its best players in position to succeed. That's a front office that prioritized star names over actual on-court fit. And then there's the psychological side of this collapse, which might honestly be the most concerning layer of the entire story. Championship-level teams have short memories. They drop a game, learn something from it, and move forward without carrying the baggage into the next one. The Liberty, right now, are visibly dwelling on every single loss. You can hear it in nearly every single answer from that press conference. Things feel heavy. They're searching. They're hoping to figure it out. That is not championship mentality. That's a team that has lost its confidence and genuinely doesn't know how to get it back. Now picture what happens when this team runs into real adversity in the playoffs. Not regular season adversity against a team they're favored to beat. Real adversity. Down 10 points in the fourth quarter of an elimination game on the road in a hostile arena, dealing with foul trouble or a bad whistle. Do you trust this Liberty team to respond? Do you trust them to find another gear based on everything we've watched over the last 2 weeks? I don't. And I don't think they trust themselves right now either. Compare this to a team like the Las Vegas Aces. They lose games too, every team does. But they never seem to lose confidence in the process. They never panic. They trust their system, they trust each other, and they execute under pressure when the lights are brightest. Right now, the Liberty are the complete opposite of that. They're panicking in July. They're questioning themselves in July. What exactly happens when the stakes actually start to matter? Here's what stings the most if you're a Liberty fan watching this unfold. This was supposed to be the year. The roster is as talented as it has ever been on paper. The Eastern Conference is wide open right now. The path to the finals is genuinely sitting right there for the taking. And instead of seizing that opportunity, instead of playing with real confidence and swagger, this team is stumbling through its own season like a group that has stopped believing in itself. That is not a talent problem. That is a culture problem. And culture problems do not fix themselves in the 2 weeks before the playoffs begin. Time is genuinely running out for this franchise to figure things out. There are only a handful of games left before the mid-season break, and then it's a sprint into the postseason. If they don't find their identity and their confidence in the next couple of weeks, they are going to limp into the playoffs as a visibly damaged team. And damaged teams do not win championships. The front office now has some genuinely difficult decisions ahead of them. Do they stick with the current coaching staff and hope things click into place? Do they consider a change mid-season and risk destabilizing things even further? The trade deadline has already passed, so a roster shakeup isn't even on the table anymore. None of these are good options, and that's because the organization put itself in this exact position with the decisions it made months ago. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud, but everyone is quietly thinking it. Maybe this Liberty roster simply isn't as good as everyone assumed. Maybe elite talent on paper doesn't automatically translate into winning basketball. Maybe these chemistry issues aren't something that gets fixed with a pep talk. Maybe a second-round playoff exit is exactly what's waiting for this team, and no amount of veteran leadership or professional pride is going to change that outcome. There's also the Caitlin Clark angle here that adds another layer of embarrassment to this whole situation. The Liberty are losing to teams they're supposed to beat comfortably, and one of those teams is built around a rookie who is single-handedly reshaping the landscape of this league. Indiana should not be beating New York. The talent gap on paper is enormous. But Indiana plays with energy, with joy, with an obvious chip on their shoulder. They play like a team that has something to prove every single night. The Liberty, right now, play like a team that believes it's entitled to win simply by showing up. And in professional sports, entitlement gets you absolutely nowhere. So here's where things stand. The New York Liberty are in genuine crisis. They're sitting at 13-12. They've dropped 4 straight games and right now they don't have any real answers. Their best player is visibly pressing. Their head coach is scrambling for solutions. Somewhere behind closed doors, the front office is almost certainly panicking. And the championship window that looked wide open just 2 months ago is slamming shut in real time, right in front of us. The real question at this point isn't whether the Liberty can win a title this season. The real question is whether they can even avoid an embarrassing first-round playoff exit. And based on everything we just broke down from that press conference, the body language, the deflections, the complete absence of real solutions, I am not optimistic. This is exactly what happens when a franchise prioritizes star power over actual system fit. This is exactly what happens when you make a coaching change for the sake of making a change. This is exactly what happens when a team loses its identity and can't figure out how to get it back. The Liberty are turning into a cautionary tale playing out in real time, and honestly, it's painful to watch as a fan of this league. So here's what I want to know from you. Can the Liberty actually turn this around, or is this season already lost? Do you still trust Breanna Stewart to lead this team out of its nosedive, or is the pressure finally too much for even her to overcome? And was firing Walt Hopkins the single biggest mistake this franchise has made in years? Because from where I'm sitting, that decision is looking worse and worse with every single loss that piles up. Drop your honest thoughts down in the comments below. Tell me if you think I'm being too harsh here, or if there's something in this situation I'm completely missing. And if you're a Liberty fan watching this right now, I genuinely want to know. Are you still confident in this roster, or are you already quietly looking ahead to next season? Look, I know breakdowns like this aren't easy to watch if you love this team. I don't make these videos to tear anybody down for the sake of it. I make them because this league deserves real, honest analysis, not empty hype, and because you, the people watching right now, deserve the truth about what's actually happening on that court. If this video meant something to you, if it made you see this season a little differently, or if it made you feel like someone out there finally said what you've been thinking, then do me a real favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to WNBA Analysis. This channel only grows because of people like you choosing to stick around, choosing to be part of this community that actually cares about this league and these players. Every single subscribe means we get to keep doing deep, honest breakdowns like this one, the kind nobody else is willing to make. So if you're still here, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you. Genuinely. Subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and let's go through this WNBA season together, win or lose, one honest breakdown at a time. This has been WNBA Analysis. I'll see you in the next one.